Hello everyone, my name is CMorrison and I am going to talk to you today about my curriculum project. It is titled Understanding the Keystone Exams, Accommodations for Students, and Defining Database Criteria for Keystone Preparation and Remediation Courses. I created 3 objectives for the project. The first objective is to inform and educate administrators on the accommodations for all students required for taking the Keystone exams. As a future administrator, I found that the Keystone exams is a topic that my knowledge must increase. Keystone exams are what school districts are being measured by and are being the assessments that students are being measured by and teachers are being measured by. So my first objective is really to inform educators on these are the requirements and procedures that one must follow when implementing the Keystone exams for students. The second objective is to discuss the need for Keystone preparation and remediation courses that best prepare our students to achieve proficiency. Currently, my school district has a remediation course for Algebra 1 and a remediation course for biology. One of the things that was discussed with my mentor, the director of education, was creating a criteria system to select students for remediation. Over the summer of 2013, the director of education created the 2 remediation courses, and any student that achieved basic or below basic was enrolled into the remediation courses. But what she wanted was a system based on data that would select what students need the remediation course. For example, for Algebra 1, the minimum score for proficiency is a 1500. There were students who scored a 1496 and are in the basic category. So using different data, a system was developed to determine what students should receive the remediation course and what students may benefit not from the remediation course but from alternative sources of remediation. The third objective is to define a database criteria to determine the placement of students in a Keystone preparation course. Also, currently we do not have a Keystone preparation course, but that was a topic that also was discussed with my mentor. 8th grade students complete testing, and PVOS has a PVOS projection to determine or to predict how well a student will do on an upcoming Keystone exam. So another part of the project is to discuss the possibility of creating a Keystone preparation course for 9th graders who will eventually take the Keystone Algebra 1 exam at the end of their freshman year. Now, to begin, I began the project by having a statement of need and a statement of change. As I explained, the focus of the project is to have a system developed where criteria can be used to select students for remediation. So later in the presentation, I will explain the process I used to determine the criteria for the selection system. Now, in the early part of the project, what I did was I looked at the Keystones as a novice. I did not know many things about the Keystones. I knew they were standardized assessments. So I approached the project as an administrator who is new and who does not have much knowledge of the Keystone exams, and I began to explain some of the different facets of the Keystone exams. I began with the purpose of the Keystone exams. And as part of the purpose, there were 3 purposes: student accountability, school accountability, and teacher accountability. Everybody in a school district is now being held accountable to Keystone exams. And through summarizing what students are accountable for, schools are accountable for, and also what teachers are accountable for, it just helps explain what exactly the purpose of the Keystone exams are and how do Keystone exams affect students, teachers, and schools. Next section, how will the Keystone exam impact school districts? The main thing I talked about here is students that are required to take Keystone exams Currently, 12th grade students, they took Keystone exams last year. Scoring proficient is not a requirement for graduation. However, with the class of 2017, scoring proficient will be required for them as a graduation requirement. And that's really what this section explains is now since the Keystone exams are being used, these are the things that students must be able to do and act to graduate to show proficiency. Now, the students of the junior class this year, the sophomore class, this current school year, they are not required to pass the Keystone exams for graduation, but their scores do count towards the school's AYP. So students are being required to take the Algebra 1, Biology, and the Literature Keystone exam, and their scores are counted towards the school's AYP. So even though the students don't have to pass them to graduate, their scores have a huge impact on the school. The school has the goal to achieve AYP based on the standards set by the state. So students who are in 10th grade who fail to pass the Algebra 1 exam, they will have another opportunity next year as juniors. And the question was, what do you do with these students? Are you just going to simply move them into the junior math class and expect that they're going to be able to pass the Keystone Algebra 1 exam during their junior year? But without remediation, it seems unlikely that a student would be able to pass an exam that they were unable to pass before. So remediation became a major focus of the curriculum project. This section, current requirements and consequences. And as I outlined, I went through each of the current classes that are in the high school, class of 2014, which are our current seniors, and I explained what each class is required to do. And really what it does is if a new administrator would walk in to school tomorrow and they would open this document, it provides them with some basic knowledge on these are the requirements that students have in relation to the Keystone exams. Now, the next three sections deal with accommodations for students. The first section deals with students without IEPs and 504 plans. Looking at the Keystone exam, there are many requirements that school districts must follow, many procedures that school districts must follow, and each of these sections explains what the different requirements are, what the different accommodations are, and it goes through in a order to help explain as administrators, as guidance counselors, as teachers, these are the things that students are allowed to have as an accommodation when taking the Keystone exam. So the first section are for students without IEPs and 504 plans. Now also within this section I put a section which describes the accommodations not allowed. So above were all the accommodations students are allowed to have. But where teachers and test proctors can get in trouble is when students use certain accommodations that they are not allowed to have. So this section outlines these are the accommodations not allowed for these students, and these are the students without IEPs or 504 plans. Okay, the next section are the accommodations for English language learners and limited English proficient students. And the setup is pretty similar. It goes through exactly who is defined as an LEP student or an ELL student, and it also goes through the different accommodations that these students are allowed. My school district, Shikellamy School District, we have an increasing Hispanic population and we have an increasing number of ELL students. So as a principal in this school, I would need to understand what these students are allowed to have who English is not their first language, and this helps explain the requirements that these students should be provided, the accommodations that these students should be provided. Now, the third section for accommodations is for students with IEPs and 504 plans. The number of accommodations is massive, and my decision was to input a web link to the accommodations. So for an administrator who would access this project, and you would click and select on the web link, it would take you to the website that provides you with the long list of accommodations for students with IEPs and 504 plans. Okay, and we'll see the web link should work. We'll take you to the website so that you can see if the web link is functional. Okay, so while the link is loading, the main thing is the accommodations. It's really the detailed list of these are the things administrators and guidance counselors need to understand to ensure that all students are treated fairly when taking the Keystone exam. All right, let's see here. Okay, for some reason the link is not working. I will have to check the link. It was working earlier, but I'll have to check and make sure that link works. The next section is the Keystone Project-Based Assessment System. Now, for students who do not achieve proficiency, there is an alternative Keystone Project-Based Assessment. And these are for students who may have taken the Keystone exams 3 times and have not passed the Keystone exams with a score of proficiency. So what the state developed was this project-based assessment in which students can complete, and the completion of the project will allow students to graduate. So the project, or this section, explains what exactly the project includes. And for administrators, it's another important part because not all students are going to pass the Keystone exams. So does that mean students aren't going to graduate? That's not the answer. There are other alternatives to the Keystone exams and scoring proficiency, and the alternative is the project-based assessment. So this section explains what exactly the project-based assessment is and what needs to happen in order for a student to participate in the project-based assessment. Okay, now, as I began to think about the remediation courses for Shikellamy High School, one of the things that came to mind was to find out what other districts in the area are doing in relation to the Keystone preparation courses and Keystone remediation courses. So I emailed close to 20 school districts throughout central Pennsylvania and even as far south as Philadelphia to find out what different programs school districts have. And out of the 20 school districts that I emailed, about 10 of them responded, and some of the school districts simply have no form of remediation set up. They have no preparation courses set up. So within this section, I summarize what some of the different districts have. And for example, Hazleton Area School District, they are one of these school districts that do not have any remediation course set up. So when I think about a school district like Hazleton, which is a very large school district, and urban as well, much like Shikellamy, my question is, how are you expecting students to achieve proficiency if you don't provide them with remediation? So a student may fail or score basic or below basic as a freshman in on the Algebra 1 Keystone exam, and they're expected again to take in their 10th grade year and achieve proficiency. But if there's no remediation between the 9th grade and the 10th grade year, are we setting the students up for failure? It seems like that. It seems like without some kind of remediation, the students are doomed to continue to be basic or below basic. Other school districts in the area had different plans for using remediation for these students. And for the school districts that had different ideas and plans, I summarized what each district did. It provides information on, here are some ideas that other school districts are using. Shikellamy right now, we are embarking on our idea of proficiency training, our remediation courses. But this section, it was an enlightening experience to find out that there's a lot of school districts that have not yet taken on this idea of remediation for students. And it's sort of, what are we thinking about? Are we actually just believing that these students are magically going to pass Keystone exams after they have not achieved proficiency once, that they're somehow going to amazingly become proficient without any sort of remediation? So this section helps explain what some of the different school districts are doing. Now, the PVOS system is an online website which provides data for teachers, for administrators, and PVOS, they do a projection of the probability of students who will achieve proficiency based on data from their 8th grade year and before. So these students right now are current 9th graders, and the PVOS data was used to determine, is there a need for a Keystone preparation course? The remediation course is already set up, but is there a need to do preparation so that maybe students who barely miss being proficient, if a preparation course was developed, would that preparation help the students gain proficiency and avoid having to be in a remediation course? So the PVOS data was one set of data that was used in the development of the proposal for a Keystone preparation course. And really, the data helped explain what students had the better chance of being proficient during their 9th grade year at the end of the Algebra 1 course. So based on the data, I was able to predict what students may be the ones that would benefit from different types of Keystone preparation. Within the section, I discussed 2 proposals for a Keystone Algebra 1 course and a regular Algebra 1 course. Certain students who are more likely to gain proficiency or be in the advanced category, these are students that would end up being enrolled in the Algebra 1 course. Students who scored lower on the PVOS projection, they would be students that would be enrolled into the Keystone Algebra 1 preparation course. So it's an idea that we have not taken on yet. It's an idea that I thought was a good start to really emphasize how important passing the Keystone exams is for students, and how important it is for schools to reach AYP through using preparation courses. So Proposal 1, and then I also have Proposal 2. And for each proposal, I discussed the pros and cons. So that's really the main thing. There's no black and white way to determine Keystone preparation courses. But through both proposals, I made my attempt to explain the benefits of each one of the proposals. Now, within the Keystone preparation section, one of the things that I ran into was an ethical question. And really what it comes down to is it right for school districts to divide students up based on ability? Today, that's not what education does. At least I know in my school district, we do not group students together based on ability. Students are in mixed classrooms, and some teachers and administrators think that's the way it should be, and others believe that by mixing high-end students and low-end students together, a lot of times classroom instruction is geared more towards the low-end students. That was one of these questions that I battled with throughout the project, is how exactly do you do a Keystone preparation course and select these students are the ones that need to go in the Keystone preparation. Now you're using data to determine that, but at the same time, some people may think that by selecting these lower achieving students and putting them into their own class together, you are not expecting as high of expectations from these students as you would from students who are enrolled in just a regular Algebra 1 course. There's really not a solution. That there wasn't some magical answer that I came up with, so I did my best to explain what I thought the ethical question was for this part. Now the last part of the project focuses on the Keystone Algebra 1 remediation course and the data that would be used to help determine student eligibility. So the first section explains what exactly our Keystone Algebra 1 remediation course is, and again, this is another one of these topics that turned into an ethical question that I had, and this was also a question I talked to the Director of Education about, talked to guidance counselors, math teachers, and I'll explain it based on the data that I had. The Director of Education, when she created the Keystone Algebra 1 remediation course, she envisioned a half-year course that would be offered twice a year. So there may be students who take it in the fall or the first semester, and then there will be another group of students that take it in the second semester. But the total number of students that she wanted was 120. So there would be 6 sections with 15. There would be 4 sections per semester with 15 students in each section. So for each semester, there'd be 60 students. Overall, the entire year, there'd be a total of 120. Now, looking at the data, there were 147 students who failed to achieve proficiency. So not all those students are going to be enrolled in the Keystone remediation course. So the question that I really had and I talked to many people about was, who do you select or who do you enroll into the remediation course? You have students that missed the minimum score of 1,500 by 15 points, 20 points, and some as close as 4 points. These are the students that probably have the greatest chance to actually achieve proficiency. So should we take the top achieving students out of the basic and below basic categories and put them in the remediation course with the thought that these are the students that are going to push the school district closer to achieving AYP? The ethical issue comes in is really by doing that and taking the top students down until you get to your top 120 students. There's another 27 students that are not going to receive remediation through a course. Are those students, are they doomed? Is there any possibility that these students are actually going to achieve proficiency without remediation? The school district's best choice would be to use the top-down approach, pick the higher achieving students for remediation. It's not the ethical choice. School districts, they need to educate all students equally. So the question really turned into, I feel what school districts have to do is you have to really work from the lower achieving students to the higher achieving students. There are other alternatives for the higher achieving students for remediation. They do not have to be enrolled in the remediation course. There's other opportunities through school tutoring and an online training website called Study Island that these students can access to help prepare them for the Keystone exam during their next year of schooling. So it was just one of these issues I talked about and I thought about, and there's really not a correct answer. There's probably the ethical answer, but the ethical answer may not result in the best results for the school when it comes to reaching AYP. Now, when determining the criteria, what I had was several sets of data. I had the Keystone scores from the spring 2013 Algebra 1 exam. And what I discussed with the Director of Education was, is there a way to use their score from the Keystones and another score or another set of data to help determine should this student be enrolled in the remediation course? So my suggestion was can we use the academic grade from the Algebra 1 course as part of a combination with the Keystone exam? So my example is John Doe scored a 486 on the spring 2013 Keystone Algebra 1 exam. So roughly he was 14 points away from being proficient. In the Algebra 1 class that he had, at the end of the year, he had a 92%. So is there a way to figure out that John Doe needs remediation based on these two numbers? So it came down to utilizing a spreadsheet and the data that I had from Keystones and the academic scores, academic grades from the subjects. And what I determined was the base number, or the minimum number students must meet, is a 1500. So for a student who has a 1486, they need to have 14 points from their academic course grade, and that would make them not a student that would be enrolled in the Keystone remediation course. So really what it came down to was plugging in numbers. I knew that the max number of seats available was 120, and I was dealing with a number of about 147. So as I worked with the data, I began to plug in different percentages to find out what kind of numbers I would get for students who would be enrolled in remediation. So I began using the number 25%, and then I used 20%, and the number that I fixed on was 15%. And what I found was when I put 15% into the spreadsheet, it created a group of students that had a high enough score based on the combination of the Keystone and the academic grade that put them over that 1500 mark, and those students would not be enrolled in the remediation course. Those students, however, will be offered remediation through Study Island, through in-school tutoring. Most students have a study hall, so that was going to be one of the options of using a study hall as part remediation for students. So overall, the system I developed currently works. What I was able to do was create an enrollment of basic and below basic students who need remediation, and these students would be enrolled in the remediation course. And there were 105 students that ended up being below the 1500 level and would be enrolled for remediation for the next school year. There were 27 students who exceeded the 1500 point level. So these students are not going to receive the remediation course, but will receive alternative remediation. Now the number 105, it's 15 seats short of 120. The reason I did that was there are students who transfer into the school, and the main thought was to leave some space, because the thing that the district and the director of education does not want to see are classes over 15. So instead of pushing it to the max, I undercut it so that there is some wiggle room for students who may enter the district. They are able to be placed into the remediation courses. Now, the one last thing with the criteria system. It's based solely on data. It is objective, and this could be a system that can be used that really does not rely on teachers having to pick students for remediation. Instead, there are two numbers. The percentage between working the numbers, certain students simply are going to be not placed in remediation. So I think the point of the remediation part of the project was to remove the subjective from selecting students and instead replace it with the objective, and that's what I feel I did with the remediation system that I developed. Now, students with IEPs and 504 plans, they are included in the Algebra 1 course, our district practices inclusion, so there's no separate math class for students with IEPs or 504 plans. Students with 504s and IEPs, they would be subject to being enrolled in the remediation course as well. The one thing that students with IEPs and 504s have is that they do have study skills sessions, which is a one-on-one interaction with a teacher, a special education teacher, to help work on their course subjects. So in addition to the remediation course that some of the students with IEPs or 504s may be enrolled in, they will receive additional support throughout a study skills class. Towards the end of the project, I created a conclusion and summarized really what I thought was the main point of the project. And I really think what it comes down to is many school districts are just starting to get involved with creating remediation courses, and the school districts that aren't, it's interesting to see what exactly will happen, because the thought of students not receiving remediation just doesn't make any sense. So that's really what I gained from the project, is our school district seems to be working towards the future. We recognize the need for remediation, and the discussion of a preparation course is also something that will be part of this project as well. The last part of the project was the discussion of the PIL standards, and I went through the PIL standards and listed the standards that I felt were applicable to the curriculum project. And for each one, I explained what exactly I feel the curriculum project did in relation to the PIL standard. Okay, overall, just to summarize my final say on my feeling towards the curriculum project, there's a lot of things that go into creating curriculum. The Keystone exams are going to have a huge impact on school districts in the future. The PA Common Core has emerged, and school districts are now looking at their curriculum to decide, is our curriculum in alignment with the PA Common Core. The PA Common Core, as far as what I have learned about it, that has been given to school districts as a guideline to say, if you want success on the Keystone exams, follow the PA Common Core. Use the PA Common Core as part of your curriculum to help guide your curriculum. So the Keystone remediation course, is geared towards success on the Keystone exams. So the PA Common Core is important because the PA Common Core should provide the standards that the course will be based on. And if the teacher and the students follow the standards and use instruction that is interactive and beneficial to students, then students should perform higher on the Keystone exams. But really, the curriculum project itself was kind of an eye-opening experience about some of the ethical questions that develop when talking about schools achieving AYP. And that's probably just really one of the main thoughts that I'll leave the project with, is school districts are under a great amount of pressure to achieve AYP, and focusing on the higher achieving students may be what's best for the school district. But based on the idea that all students should be treated equally and receive an equal education, remediation is needed for lower achieving students as well. And it really it was an ethical dilemma that, as I discussed it with people throughout my school, no one really had a firm answer. So much of my discussion was based on what exactly the two sides are, and that's just something I will remember from the curriculum project. And also, as a future administrator, as I enter a school who may not have addressed remediation and Keystone preparation, this provides me with background and information on how exactly to select students and how to get remediation and preparation courses planned. So I found great value in the curriculum project. So I hope I explained everything so you understand exactly what I was doing. And thank you very much.